I can explain. Hi Taylor. If your name's not Taylor, my name's Azaria. I'm a fiction writer living in Nebraska. There are some redeeming qualities about Nebraska. I can't, yeah, you know what I mean. So today I wanted to go over my unhinged pitch plan or query plan or getting an agent in 2025 plan. This is inspired by these videos. I have a plan for getting an agent that I think is foolproof, and I'm here to tell you guys about it today. Believe it or not, this is a cell phone and not a microphone, and I will actually be using it to read notes. So my plan is split into 3 separate parts. First, there are revisions, and then there's feedback, and then there's the pitching or querying process. Hell yeah. So even though I've split it into these 3 parts, these sections will overlap quite a bit, and I hope that I'm able to convey to you how that's happening. All right, first step, make it readable. By the way, throughout this presentation, I'll just be using pictures of my favorite books and writers and things just to further illustrate my points. This is where I go through and fill in anything that's missing in the manuscript. Even if I'm putting something in there that's nonsensical, I essentially want to be able to look back over it and understand what I was going for in all of those parts of the novel. This is one of my favorite short story collections released within the past 5 or so years. Hell yeah. When writing, I'll leave highlights in certain parts of the manuscript, usually in places where I need to do research and thus need more information, or things that are specific like geographic locations, neighborhood names, makes and models of cars, things like that. Those things I usually go back in and put later, but I'll leave a highlight in those areas so that I know where I need to come back to. This step is exactly what it sounds like. This is the part of the manuscript where I make it make sense. I make sure that the reader can understand what's going on in the entire work of the novel. So that way, when I have to come back and do other revisions there for smaller and more specific things, which I'll talk to you about. But there shouldn't be any super large revisions where there's a scene that doesn't make sense or things are out of a certain chronology or something like that. The manuscript after this revision should make sense from top to bottom. One of my characters is an attorney, and if you don't know, this is Maxine Shaw, attorney at law from the show Living Single. Hell yeah. So one of my characters is an attorney, and so there are a considerable amount of scenes in the manuscript that take place in the courtroom or involve jargon, involve legalese, legal language. So I want to make sure that I'm accurately representing those parts. There are also some scenes in the novel that are critical of the United States legal system, so I want to make sure that I'm correctly critiquing those parts. This, of course, is the one and only Toni Morrison, who wrote one of the prevailing magical realism novels, Beloved. Due to the nature of how magical realism works in my manuscript, there are a lot of parts where I'm bordering on fantasy. And so I really want to make sure that in a certain revision, I go through and I make sure that all the magic elements in the story are giving magical realism and not fantasy. I don't want the reader to have to spend too much time wondering about the magic or why the magic is happening, because the characters in the story aren't necessarily going to be having those same curiosities. This is just how things go in their life. And so unlike fantasy, there shouldn't need to be an entire system of magic or an entire new reality that I have to explain to the reader. I tried to record from over there and it didn't. Hell yeah. So the main characters for this novel are really important to me. I wrote this novel in response to feedback that I should write a novel that's more plot driven. And so this novel is more plot driven than what I would normally write, but at the heart of it is still the characters. So it's still a character driven narrative. And I really think that characters is something that I do really well, characters and relationships. When working on the characters, I think a really big part of that is working on their dialogue. And so primarily in this revision, I'll be going through and working on the dialogue of the main characters. In this step, I'll be doing something very similar to what I did with the main characters, but with the secondary characters. And I actually forgot to say that what I like to do when working on dialogue specifically is I like to go through and tag anything that I think sounds like me and not like someone else. So anything that I feel like is written in my own voice, I like to tag and then come back to find a way to reword it. But this step is also where I'll be cutting out any unnecessary secondary characters that I have in my novel. I know that I have maybe 3 to 4 characters that I would be okay with cutting and figuring out a way to write the manuscript around them. And just at this stage that I'm currently at, I'm not sure if the characters are necessary. So hopefully after a while, and once I get to this revision stage, I'll have a better idea of whether the characters are necessary or not. The passage of time is always important to me in any creative piece that I write because I feel like it's something that sits at the back of my mind. I'm always worried about the characters and the world and the reasoning, that just making sure that the reader has an understanding of just how much time is going by is not really a top concern for me as I'm writing. But once I get into revision, it's one of my biggest concerns. Sometimes in a short story, you can do really simple things in order to make the passage of time clear. So you can say stuff like, it was Friday, it was noon, it was 9 a.m. And then the passage of time becomes a lot clearer throughout the rest of the story. However, in a novel, that's not really the case. You have so many things to keep track of: events, the plot itself, characters. So a simple, it was Friday, it was noon, might not necessarily be effective. Then I'm revising for a sense of place in the novel. There are some distinct juxtaposing places in this novel, and I want to make sure that the juxtaposition is clear for the reader. Dedicating some time to that is going to be really helpful, and it is important that I stop here. I really think that I could revise this novel until the day I die, really, just finding things to tweak and twerk and twerk to get it sort of closer and closer to perfect. And so I feel like if I don't put a boundary in place, no matter how arbitrary, I'll just continue going back to this novel. Now, somewhere within these revisions, within this overall plan, my chapbook will get published. Yes, that's right. Through WTAW Press, my chapbook, The Smiths on 115th Street, will be published sometime in February. And I will have a video coming about just sort of writing a chapbook, the process of that. But it's really a good tool for leverage. It's a good way to kind of introduce the world to your writing. You can give it to people. So if you're at any sort of writing networking event, you can give those to people. They usually don't cost very much, and usually get a certain amount of free copies. And then in addition to that, this is the first time that I'm having sort of like a team that's pushing something of mine, that's putting it out into the world. There is marketing behind the chapbook. There's a design team around the chapbook. Not a huge team, but more than just me. And so I'm really interested in just sort of taking in what happens during this process. Throughout this entire process, I want to be building community. So it's really important to develop a network of people that would like to see you succeed. Not only does that mean that they're looking out for your writing, they're maybe purchasing a copy of your book or your chapbook or a magazine that your writing happened to be in, but it also means that if there are any opportunities that they think you might be good for, they'll probably forward those along to you. So usually after any large networking event or workshop or something like that, there's usually some way that someone initiates to keep in touch. If no one's initiating that, maybe step up, maybe be the person to initiate that. It can be hard and it can be nerve-wracking, but it's always really beneficial. Usually there's going to be a group chat or an email chain or Instagram follow train or something that you can hit yourself onto to make sure that you stay a part of this community and that your personal network continues to grow. Now this is where we get into letting other people read my writing. So this is where things really start to crisscross because I'm not through with all of my revisions yet. I'm actually taking a break right now. My next revision is the legalese revision, but I've actually already sent this novel to a couple of people who are giving me feedback soon. But my inner circle, the inner circle is just people that I trust, whose opinions I trust, just peers. Some people that are part of this inner circle group were in my workshop class this semester, and I got some really good feedback on parts of the novel in that class. The most important part of an inner circle, though, of having people that you know and love read your work and give you feedback is making sure that they're going to be honest with you and you making sure that you're going to take their opinions. Are you ready to hear someone close to you tell you something negative about your writing? Is that person ready to tell you something negative about your writing, or rather something constructive? Just food for thought. The respected queens are people who I really look up to in the writing space, who have gotten way more done than me, have had longer careers than I've had, who have been gracious enough to offer to read some of my work. I actually have already sent the manuscript to one of these people as well. See, we're all topsy-turvy. I wanted to make sure that when I sent the writing to this tier of beta readers, that I was really certain that I had something that I wanted to pursue. I didn't want to waste their time. And this is not to say that I wanted to waste the time of my closer friends. It's just that I feel more comfortable sending a chapter or two for a friend to look at instead of sending an entire manuscript for someone who is very busy. Hell yeah. Now, hired readers, I have never hired a beta reader, but I have been a beta reader, and I am a beta reader. And just the process of vetting a beta reader does not seem like something that I want to do, but it is something that I'm willing to do if I feel like my writing would benefit from that, especially if I feel like there are certain gaps in the feedback that I've received that a hired reader could help me fill. Last but not least is author as reader, so that's me. I'm the author, that's me. And this is just when I've been done with all of my revisions for a little while. I've been able to let the manuscript sit for a couple of months, and I usually am working on other things, and that means that I have forgotten sort of the specifics and the intricacies of the manuscript, and I'm able to look back at it with some sort of objectivity. And that's usually what happens with my short stories. That's when I do the best revision on my short stories, is when I let them sit for a month or so that I kind of have forgotten what I've written. And then it allows me to look back at the writing as if someone else wrote it, and then I'm way more willing to make cuts to things. All throughout this process, I'm refining my blurb and my query letter. Refining the blurb is really important, and I tend to do that after every revision because something about the novel becomes a little different after every revision. And refining the query letter is also important. Last but not least, I will be using a tiered pitching process. In 2023, I went to AWP for the first time, and the AWP conference is like the biggest writing conference in the country, and you can get a lot out of it or you can get nothing out of it. So AWP does the writer to agent program every year, and if you buy a registration for the conference, then you essentially get a shot at querying an agent and having them meet with you. In 2023, I was fortunate enough to sit down and talk with 3 agents, and they all said that they wanted to read whatever I was working on at the time when it was finished. Those projects have been put on the whip list, so I haven't worked on them since. But I do have 2 manuscripts, or I plan to have 2 manuscripts ready that I can pitch to these people. And they're represented by this Mariah Carey image because one of their names was Mariah. My next step in my tiered pitching process or querying process would be to reach out to agents that represent writers that write similarly to me. Not writers whose writing I admire. Those are 2 different things. But writers that I feel like have a similar style to me, then I will pitch to those agents. Next, I will query just agents in general. When I was a freelance writer full-time, I used to send cold emails, so about 5 nonprofits or companies every single day, which would amount to 25 emails a week. And so I'll probably instill something like that. The rejection rate is very high when cold emailing, just in general. So I'm expecting that, and I'm not really swayed by rejection, honestly. I'm a writer, baby. I get rejected all the time. And then finally, if I don't get agented through that last process, then I will be pitching and submitting to specific contests that I respect and enjoy. There are lots of contests that will accept your full-length manuscript for a fee. They'll read it, and if you are one of the winners of the contest, then you get a certain advance on your royalties. You get printed copies, and you get a publication deal along with some marketing. And so if the other processes don't work out, then that's what I'll try. That's my plan to get an agent in 2025. I will keep you updated. I'll tell you how it goes. Are you agented? Are you not? I don't know. Feel free to tell me if you'd like. I know Taylor doesn't have an agent. Taylor's a self-published indie author, but I just would like to go the more traditional route myself. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll leave you with this image of Mariah Carey.